today we're going to learn how to read critically. And so you really don't have to be a scientist. You just have to use some some systematic way to approach a paper. So, oh boy, let's see how we move it. There we go. So here's what we're going to talk about. First, I'm going to give you some general pointers, just sort of general things to think about. We're going to talk about what are the sections of a research paper, and then I'm going to give you some step-by-step ways to go through a paper. And understand that some of this is going to be repetitious, but sometimes repetition reinforces. So first, think critically. Don't always think that because somebody has an MD, a PhD, or whatever after their name, they know everything. Don't always assume that authors are correct. Ask questions, and think of questions in your mind that you would have and see if they're answered as you read through the paper. And think about, are the investigators actually asking the right questions, or are they solving the right problems, and are they approaching it logically? Are the assumptions that they make reasonable in your mind? And read creatively. What do you think was good about the paper? What do you think was sort of novel and interesting? And is there translation of those ideas elsewhere? Don't be embarrassed to take notes. If you saw some of my college textbooks, I mean, yeah, they're just overlined. Everything's yellow, and there's all kinds of notes in the margins. Always think about questions and criticisms. Underline what you think are the most important takeaways. What's the most important thing about what you read? And mark what you think is questionable also. So, and after you read anything, think about it, and can you actually summarize it and teach it? Everybody always says, if you can make something simple to someone else, you understand it. And if you, after you read something, you can sort of put it together in a few sentences, that solidifies it and underscores that you understand the material. And there may be, that way you may see, hey, I better go back and read that again. I didn't quite understand it. You can always consider, if you're really interested in a topic, going back and looking at the background, the references. And always think about, what did this study add? Was this just a me too? Or did it really grow and enlarge our knowledge base and extend it? And it's going to be slow at first, but don't worry about it. I mean, that's the way things are. You're not going to be like, oh, great, from the start. So now, what are the sections? So those are some pointers as you go through a paper, just keeping those in mind. But let's talk more solidly about what can you expect if you're opening up a research paper. You heard about this clinical trial and you wanted to pull up the actual paper and read it. What are the sections you're going to be facing, and what do each of them contain? There's going to be an abstract, an introduction, methods, results, a conclusion, and then of course the references that the work was based on. And let's start with, what's an abstract? That's actually the summary of the paper. It should maybe give a little bit of background that led to what the question was. It should present the key results, really what they want your take home to be. And then it's going to give you a brief bullet of what you can conclude from the results. And so, some people go right to that, but as I'll show you when we talk about how you read a paper, you read the abstract last. So let's start with the introduction of a paper. So we're opening our paper, and the first thing we do is look at the introduction, and that's going to introduce the background. What's gone before? What led to this question being asked? And it should have the previous work, and it should be a very logical extension that, because of this background, this is why I'm asking this question. And it should really outline the basic reason for the study and the question being asked. You should be asking, before you even finish, you should be saying, well, somebody should look at this. The methods clearly tell, okay, I've got this question. How am I going to answer it? What am I going to do? How am I going to design a study that answers it How am I going to carry out the experiment? And then the results are the results. What did we find? What was the data that we got from this experiment? And the conclusions should just be, okay, I have these results. How do I interpret them, especially in the context of what we know, especially in the background? And that means you have to, again, go in what previous work has been done in the area. How do your results fit into that and extend it? And where do we go from here? What should the next steps be to enhance our knowledge base and to move the field forward? And then, of course, the references simply are the background and the literature that your study was based on, or that the study was based on. So moving to the next step, okay, we know the parts, we know the sections of a paper. We have some clues about what we should be doing when we read a paper, some sort of ideas. But how do we step by step read a paper? Well, first of all, when you read, look up words you don't know. And I always say Google and Wikipedia are your friend. Just Google it. I mean, God, what do we do? I don't know. I'm sure, well, I'm pretty old, but I remember going, I wanted to do research or look up references on a topic. I had to go to something called Index Medicus, which weighed as much as I do, each tome, and it would be all the publications for a whole year. And I'd have to go through that and look it up by area of interest. Maybe it would be pathogenesis of ALS or whatever, or oxidative stress ALS. And it was just so tedious. Now I just Google it. And if I don't know something and I want to read just a summary about a topic and I Google it and I go to Wikipedia, I'll get a whole, sort of summary about that area. So, I mean, in the past, this is so different than what we were used to 20 years ago. So Google and Wikipedia are your friend. Take notes when you read, and reread. If you're not sure, just reread the section. Now, here's how we start. We start with the introduction, because that lays the foundation, the groundwork, gives you the background. It's sort of like the foundation you're going to build the house on. So it presents the supporting information on which the study was based. And it then should lead right to what the big question is, what the problem is that the field is trying to solve, and that this publication or this experiment was trying to look at. And it should really reinforce the importance. And it really should be so logical that this is the question. It should lead directly to the specific question. That question shouldn't come out of the blue. It should be built on, A happened, then equals B. Oh, what happens is B? Does it lead to C? So it should lead directly to the question being asked. And you want it to sound logical, and most of you can think logically to some extent. So make sure that after you read the introduction, you really can summarize the background and what's being asked and what the results are going to add to the field. Then you read the methods, and you want to look at the approach. Now, this can be really tough for you guys on a basic science paper. So you want to get the gist, though, of how are the investigators approaching? Does it seem logical? Is the design of the study likely to be valid? Will it answer the question? You can even try making a diagram, use that pen and make notes, and diagram what the investigators are doing. And what I think many of you are going to be most interested in are clinical trials. So what you want to do when you look at that method section is, how did they design the study and control population? And our paper is going to give you some clues, and you'll see that it isn't so difficult. How was the medication dosed? How did they judge safety? How were the treatment and control groups determined? How was efficacy measured? And thanks to Eric, you'll now know how the results were analyzed, right? Everybody knows a p-value by now, right? But you can see, did it seem to be a good analysis, a valid way to look at the results? And then you read the results. Pay attention to the figures and tables because they often contain the most key points that the investigator wants to make. Pay attention to whether the results there answered the question that was being asked. And in clinical trials, were the control and treatment groups similar at the start? Were there safety issues? Did the intervention actually work? Was there statistical significance? So, and you know how to do that now. And then you read the conclusion, discussion, interpretation. It's called different things, but basically those results, how does it fit into the grand scheme of things? And what does it mean for the field? So did the investigator interpret his results correctly in your mind? Do you agree with it? Is there any other way that those results could be interpreted? And does the investigator also talk about weaknesses? There's always weaknesses. There's always problems. And if somebody doesn't admit to them, then there may be a problem. And does the investigator take the results that they have and their conclusions and put it in the grand scheme of things? And always, what does the study add to what we know? And where do we go from here? And references they're there for you to look at if you want more information and you want to really know about the background. Now you go back to the abstract. And was that an accurate summary of what you just read? So, to end, do not be afraid to jump in and read the literature. Be an informed consumer. That's really important. Learn to be critical and learn to be creative. Ask questions. Let me tell you, some of the questions folks ask, pals have asked me, I don't know the answer to. They ask really good questions. You have the ability to ask really good questions and prompt us to really think. And, with practice, this will be much easier.